Steigt in den DeLorean. Wir werfen den Fluxkompensator an und reisen zurück in die Zukunft der KI. Alexander Tam beschäftigt sich seit über 15 Jahren mit den Themenfeldern Data Science und künstliche Intelligenz und nimmt euch mit auf eine Zeitreise durch das Datenuniversum. Schnallt euch an, lehnt euch zurück, ihr hört Back to the Future of AI.
Ja, herzlich willkommen zu einer weiteren Folge vom neuen Podcast Back to the Future of AI. Ich freue mich riesig, heute den Abel Achundia bei mir zu haben. Vielleicht habt ihr uns schon mal gesehen, wir hatten schon einen ganz coolen gemeinsamen Auftritt zusammen am Data Festival. Genau. Und Abel ist bekannt als einer der einflussreichsten CIOs. Er wurde vom CIO-Magazin als einer der Top-CIOs der Pharmabranche bezeichnet. Nach Stationen bei Novartis, Bayer Pharma ist er heute Managing Director Global Life Sciences und Industrials bei Istari. Ja, uns verbindet das Thema KI und die Weiterentwicklung der Gesundheitsbranche. Wir werden das Interview und den Podcast auf Englisch weiterführen.
Please.
Abel, great to have you.
It's great to be here, Alex, and to be back, together after what was a difficult time for, I guess, everybody.
Yes, that's correct. So, Abel, for the people who don't know you yet, tell us a little bit about yourself. So excited still to have you here.
Couple of words. So I was born and raised in Mexico, and then after a stint as an entrepreneur in the early days doing some coding, I've then done careers in management consulting with BCG. Then I was managing director with Dell in Mexico, in their business unit in Mexico. But then the last 17 years or so, I was global CIO, especially in pharma, as you say. So the CIO discipline is very tough, as many of the people in the audience will hear. One of the best parts was to see data science really come true, and artificial intelligence methods start to be applied. The last couple of years, I decided to go back as an entrepreneur. It's been very scary, a lot of fun. You've seen firsthand what this journey is, and you've been, to some extent, my coach in being able to keep the energy levels when things get tough. Glad to be here, and obviously, let's go back to the future.
Thank you, Abel. So the theme is this Back to the Future movie, which is obviously one of my favorites. And so there's two main characters, right? Marty McFly and Doc Brown. So if you tell us a little bit about yourself, like which character do you feel more with, or who would you like to be in the movie?
I would answer by saying that my dad reminds me a lot of Dr. Brown. So I think that my father is an innovator, an investigator, a researcher, and I saw this firsthand. So I never identified myself too much with what it takes to be on that seat. I think I'm more like Marty. I have fun, and I'm along for the ride.
Very nice, very nice. So tell us a little bit about the ride. I mean, being mentioned as one of the most influential CIOs, it's a great honor, and then you have this tremendous impact in the industry. And then you said, okay, I want to do something else. Or tell us a little bit, how was your journey and during the last years?
Okay. So I think if you look at my career and the things that I've been passionate about, and passion I think is a defining element of many of the things that I try to do in my career, it's been at the intersection between technology and business, and this intersection is increasingly driven by information and the way we use it. So when we look at information technology, it's the information part that drives me the most. And that's kind of been the constant on my corporate and non-corporate challenges. So I think that what has been fantastic is to see over the last couple of decades in particular, but really over 30 years of career, you can see that I'm not that young, how the 35. Technology, I'm 35. Yeah, since I started working, man. The technology cycles underneath the information have been incredibly rewarding. So when we started having, when I started programming, we did not have PCs. And then I saw how PCs became adopted. Then I saw the browsers become the way that we interacted with the world and with one another. I saw Windows being Bill Gates' dream really come true. And then, of course, the mobile devices and the Apple Store, which for me is a great showcase of innovation and ingenuity. And that has been, again, the constant is how the exchange of information between people and between businesses enabled by technology. But the point is not the technology, but the enablement of interaction. And that's animated me for years. I continue to have a lot of fun with it. I think there's also a lot of waste that can be addressed. There's a lot of creativity and innovation that can be brought to the table, and people like you and your team have been at the forefront of that. And there's no question that for the boy in me, for the Marty in me, the application and usage of machine learning and artificial intelligence, I'm very optimistic about this. I believe that people like you will set guardrails for how this technology is used and applied. And I don't think that a lot of people realize just how much we are already using data science and machine learning and even artificial intelligence in our day-to-day lives, to go from place A to place B, to shop, to find the preferred location for our vacations. All of these are already important pieces of artificial intelligence and machine learning that make our lives better. And now my discipline, cybersecurity, has to do with making sure that it's also resilient and safe. And that is still a very big action item.
So thank you very much. So looking back a little bit maybe, or just starting with the past. So how can you describe how the topic of AI data, and even wider with your view that you had as a CIO, how did usage of information data and coming then to also AI, how did this change and evolve during the last 10, 20 years?
Okay. That's the last 20 years, I think. Remember, let's say that they started with a big discussion around Y2K. Many people in the audience will be younger than that, and maybe they hadn't started their professional lives at all, maybe not even grade school. But there was, once upon a time, children, there was a big story around what would happen at the turn of the century. Between the 90s and the 2000s, we would all lose our bank accounts. The trains will not work. The airplanes would fall from the skies, because computers had not been designed to jump into the 2000s, and everything will reset to zero. Well, we did a lot of work. I want to think that some of that avoided disasters happening, but in general, nobody noticed.
But now talking, I don't know what you can share, but was there a real risk?
Yes, there was. In isolated computer systems. We have to keep in mind that at the time, the computer systems were not as interlocked as today. The data exchanges between information systems were largely through flat files or other mechanisms that had very defined fields. And those fields sometimes only had 4 characters or 2 characters for years. And that's what we needed to resolve. But in a way, the electricity grid or the supply chains were nowhere near as connected, as interdependent back then as they are today. So largely, we could contain the risk and also remediate the issues within systems and even within applications. This is not something that, as we have seen more recently with some of the Log4j attacks or the concern we already have with a spill out of cyber weapons to the day-to-day, we're all worried because our lives are so interconnected and so dependent on systems that are completely one and the same. When you think that 99%, well, probably 99.999% of the exchanges happen between computers talking to computers, applications talking to applications through APIs, something like a Y2K today would be unthinkable.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Okay, so there was a risk like for isolated systems, but not like the total world crash that some people were kind of.
Well, look, if you talked to the big consulting firms, everybody said, no, yeah, you have to go remediate. And if you're not sure, let's look at it. And we all spent a lot of money. I spent a lot of time and also made a lot of money by looking at this, from the strategic to the tactical to the technical. We were all very excited about this. And I remember buying candles for the 2000
Really?
just in case. Yes.
Okay.
Obviously, it didn't happen, but we did learn from that. I mean, and one of the big lessons was that we could be a lot more integrated and that we needed to architect our systems for interoperability. I'd like to think that the emergence of SAP as one of the core transactional systems and continues to be a system of reference for enterprise planning is a little bit a result of people becoming aware of just how inefficient interfaces are.
Okay.
And I think that, for example, I mean, in Germany, clearly SAP became, and it continues to be, one of the dominant technology players in the world. And as a long-time user of the system, as a CIO, of course, it helped me sleep better at night. It's a really good system to protect our financials. But the world has moved so much beyond just financials for using computers, right? We use computers, I mean, 20 years on, we see that computers are in everything and absolutely anything we do. And that was not the case even only 20 years ago.
Yeah, I remember I had my first business that wasn't a big success. My internet cafe I started at this time. So the 2000 wasn't a big problem, fortunately. But then what happened? Like how did also if you look a little bit towards the development of data and AI now today? So what were in your mind? We didn't plan for this question. Yeah,
but it's a conversation.
I mean, what were the crucial steps you think, or that you witnessed in terms of systems changing, awareness that led to this? Big data explosion, also to the capabilities we have today. What were the crucial steps that maybe most of the data scientists today won't even remember that happened?
I think that it's an important question, not only a good question, but I think it's important. In the time before enterprise resource planning systems, before ERPs, we had department level computer systems. So these computer systems were the HR system or the payroll system, or the finance and accounting system. SAP changed that from a large enterprise perspective by creating integrated systems that had modules. So then you would have the finance, accounts payables, account receivables, general ledger module. And these systems depended on joint databases. For some of your audience, maybe some of the people listening to us, you will have interacted with so-called SAP tables. And these tables were implemented in Oracle technologies generally. There were others, but Oracle was the gold standard and continues to be a superb relational database. But there were other implementations. And at the beginning of this whole thing, it wasn't so clear whether hierarchical databases, decentralized databases, object-oriented databases, or relational databases would win. At the end of the day, relational databases, for some of your more research-oriented people, they will have spent time discussing and debating on internet cafes whether we should do relational, hierarchical, or object-oriented for this particular implementation. Look, 90% of the world, 95% of the data scientists assume that the database will be relational.
Sure, yeah.
It's almost sure. It wasn't the case always, right? So then these relational databases allowed departments to relate to one another but use the same table. And then this started to become more the norm and the standard. And then the databases, I mean, if they were isolated, they would lose sync. They would have to be refreshed. They would depend on interfaces. And we all kind of hated interfaces. So today, your data scientists and many of the people listening to the podcast probably assume that databases need to interoperate. They need to be, automatically synced with a background process. And you don't have to worry too much about what is that. You need to spend your time discussing the topology of the data set, and you need to understand the architecture of the business process on top of it. But many of the technical components are there as a standards almost. And there's now a lot of different, very elegant implementations of technology to allow managing these databases at the record level, and you don't have to worry about it. But it was not always the case. And I think that is a big enabler for the kind of data science that we do today. Now, please ask me, and I think that we should have a quick conversation around how clean the data is. Because I think that there was then, after databases became available, we went into a mood where more is better. And we were adding more records, adding more elements to the table, bigger tables, and then it was more is more.
Yeah, and then we came into this era of big data, that the internet was generating a lot of information. We had devices talking to devices, Internet of Things and everything. And where did this come from? I mean, obviously there was technology that was now enabling us, like Hadoop and systems that were horizontally scalable to store the data on a much lower price. But yeah, please, what is your experience with that? Or
I'm a hardware engineer by training, so that's what I do think that progress in hardware and miniaturization have been a big driver, because the cost of storage as well as the cost of processing are the two main variables behind the explosion in data availability and device prevalence. I mean, it's gone down by, I think, 10 order of magnitudes what it costs to store records over the last 2 decades, as well as the cost of processing. And I mean, for most of us now, the cloud is a given. But the cloud was not a given even 7 years ago. 10 years ago, for sure not.
What was the largest data center you managed as a CIO? How big was it?
Very, 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 very big.
Because I think it's also something that is hard to imagine for very fresh starters in data science and AI, that all of you were responsible for those huge warehouses full of
computers and racks. Well, I think that the biggest one that I was directly responsible for was clearly during my time with one very big pharmaceutical company based in Switzerland. The data centers, it wasn't just one, were multiple floors on very large buildings. So, I mean, I could express it in terms of teras or in terms of racks, but these were places that had, thousands, maybe 3,000-4,000 racks that were humming, and they were like you see in the movies. Most of these data centers still exist. I mean, the technology inside is been refreshed. It is not the case that we closed all of the data centers. The best fit of the data centers are now operated by Google or Microsoft or IBM, and they offer it in turn as a shared service to many clients, because the technology cycles within a single rack have made it possible to store what used to be in a floor big data center. Now it just fits in a rack. And that is incredibly exciting to me, to think that my iPhone has equivalent capability to the Fars data center that I managed.
That's so crazy.
It is amazing, and it's so exciting. I can only think, when this interview happens in 10 years, how exciting it will be. And that, I think, I go back to all of us have used to thinking about computers as driven by software, but the big revolution has not been in the Windows operating system or even in Java. It's been in the hardware and the storage that allows for processing and storage to be just incredibly efficient and cheap, even free.
But then you said but just having more and bigger data wasn't the case, right? So you talked about cleanliness of data. So what happened then? Maybe switching gears a little bit, then when AI came into play and machine learning.
That's when I changed jobs.
Okay.
Because I think that I at the time when machine learning methods came into open source, and the mathematics, you know this better than me, but there's maybe 10 or 12 mathematic implementations that are necessary for a library of maybe 100 methods for time series, for forecasting, and for categorization and segmentation. The math is not that complicated anymore, and it's been cracked. I thought at the time, and this is maybe 7 years ago, that I didn't want to be really just cost cutting, and I really wanted to enable people like you. And at the time, data science was not. All data scientists were generalists. They needed to do data cleanliness. They needed to understand the mathematics. They needed to be able to code. They needed to be able to interact with business people. Today, we have maybe 10 or 12 different roles for data scientists to perform. But at the time, I could see that the people who could do this were, interestingly, they were the good forecasters in procurement. They were good forecasters in finance. And they would come to the IT people usually just to get bigger computers and faster access. They were not really coming to us to partner on the coding because they could do the code. In pharmaceuticals in particular, there's extraordinary capabilities in research. So the people who are using AI and machine learning for research have been doing it for 10 years. And these people were certainly smarter than me, very smart. And all they needed was faster computers, better bandwidth, better storage, and that I get out of the way. And I love that because that is a challenge. You know, how do you stay relevant as an IT department to people who are launching rockets in figuratively? That was a fascinating time for me to really come to them and ask, what do you need? And what I found, and you probably continue to see this, maybe people in the podcast still experience this, is the data that they had to work with was only half usable because it was very dirty. And the one that was clean was not always annotated so that a computer could use it well. So most of the time of the early data science teams was spent cleaning up the data so that the records that you kept were gold records, and then making sure that the data that they had cleaned was annotated enough that a machine learning agent could be trained. And that occupied about 4 days a week. And they were doing the fun stuff, the good stuff, 1 day a week. And then I made it my goal, my purpose, to try to reduce that time of and to move to my team in IT the data cleanliness, and to enable them with tools that they could arrive to gold data sets and really set the parameters for what good looks like on their data science, maybe 3 days a week instead of only one.
Wow.
And
So
it's not always working. But well, yes and no, because I think that, yes, I'd like to think that my teams were successful in doing more of this, making data what you would call fair, accessible, interoperable, and so on, findable. At the same time, I think data science became in the corporations a little bit of a battleground for politics. Is it going to be you hiring the data scientists, or is it going to be me hiring the data scientists in IT, or are these people that should be co-located with business or run by the business, let's say procurement, or by the commercial team? I don't think that's resolved fully, but we're getting better. I mean, and that's just where I see the human aspect of data science, if you will.
Very nice. You touched upon so many things. So and I'm really feeling this now. I'm really like in the zone, and I'm also reliving this now. It's very nice how vividly you tell us about this. So you are CIO. You basically are a cost center. You are having a high uptime, reliability focus. You have to cut costs. You have to leverage new technology, and then there's data and IT. Overnight, let's say, driven by the tech giants, kind of becomes more of the place for innovation, right? So how did this? I mean, how does this change? How did you relive this then, especially in the pharmaceutical industry? I know the history. I relived it in the manufacturing industry, and how was it like when CDOs popped up and they were like the cool guys, and they got the budget and the labs, and how did this happen? You said you were becoming more of an enabler, or you said, okay, now this is a challenge, or this is I love the challenge. How can I stay relevant? But can you touch a little bit upon this? Because I think this was really a very, very interesting time where the role of the CIO changed from delivering 100% quality at low cost to becoming agile, being innovator, and driving even new business models?
Right on. I think that there were two inflection points that I would go back to. One is when business leaders, let's say the executive committee, realized that the head of IT needed to become chief information officer. Mm-hmm. So if you notice, there's that was the first inflection point that became prevalent maybe 7 years ago, 5 to 7 years ago, where people the titles started going from head of IT, information technology, to being the chief information officer, a person who was in charge of information that people used, and technology was an enabler to that information. I think that was one inflection point. The next one became where businesses bought into the idea of digital transformation and a digital future, in which some organizations decided that the chief information officer needed to partner with a chief digital officer who was more a business person that would set the agenda, whereas the information officer would enable that agenda. Other organizations created joint roles, a chief information and digital transformation lead. And I think that those are the organizations that in my mind still continue to set the agenda. For one reason, I mean, in the time of the first inflection point, I mean, you go from head of IT to chief information officer, you realize you need to equip for business dialogues. Mm-hmm. Some of us were able to, others less so. But in general, we created at that time business partners that were then in charge of understanding the business agenda and translating them, that agenda, into IT requirements.
Mm-hmm. Like a resort IT, like a...
exactly, like an ambassador. Like an ambassador from the IT function to the business and vice versa. That has limitations in that some of the business partners became just messengers, and that is that's lower value add. However, when I look at the economics of the IT function and the economics of my business as a CIO, you know, I had enormous resources, and they were not always applied to the highest business priority.
But they were also like, it was not free budget, it was applied to running systems and...
Yeah, you're right. But at the same time, the economics of the systems, if you are alert to it, I mean, they still continue to follow Moore's law. I mean, the computer next year will be cheaper. Okay. Cloud was a more flexible storage capability. You could spin up many more servers than before. You could find creative ways to co-locate your data centers with others. You could do sale and lease back arrangements. You could do contracts for transactional things. I have to say that my teams, I mean, it was hard, but they never struggled finding cost opportunities or cost reduction opportunities in operating budgets. And twice in my career over the last 10 years, I've been blessed by having a partner in the finance function. Occasionally I reported to the CFO. In the case of Bayer, for example, Julio Triana, he's an exceptional CFO. And we had a partnership that allowed us to he said, Abel, if you believe you can really cut 10%, then you can spend 5% on innovation.
Split the difference.
And we'll check every 6 months how things are going.
Okay, so that's
split
very
the difference, exactly. And that's a mindset of a business leader that looks at the opportunity.
Yes, that's awesome. I could continue. Just one thing, because that's all in the first project we did at BMW. We always kind of piggybacked on larger programs, like larger company-wide, I don't know, quality improvement or whatever that was. And then we helped to do some of the stuff at very, very effectively. And then the rest of the budget we kind of rerouted to do innovation that we couldn't get financed, like, because we would have had a hard time to do a business case around this or something. So I love the idea. So following Moore's law, becoming more efficient, and then taking half the money, give it to the CFO that he stays happy, and then the rest, half the money you could play with and build for the. So is this looking today is because then we had you talked about the CDOs coming in, and in the automotive industry there was a big fight between CIOs and CDOs. It wasn't a long time not really clear who makes the battle.
The decisions, yeah.
No, I think nobody won, but I know it's a different story. But how would you say, how is it today? So is it still hard to get budget for financing AI or data initiatives that are maybe not particularly for one specific use case, or if we go now, we come from the past and now are arriving at today, how would that be?
Yeah, I think any business initiative, regardless of which it is, always has to be justified by a business case.
Sure.
Or even if it's just an innovation, an idea. I mean, I love to work with companies that have innovation as a at-risk budget, and they think of it a little bit as research. Let's try things and find out.
Yeah.
The majority of us still have to create business cases for any good idea that we come up with. That business case, typically for digital initiatives, digital transformation initiatives, has a very high return on that investment. Mm-hmm. It's also very risky, high risk, high reward. Mm-hmm. So you need to just be able to create enough flexibility in the business proposal that you make so that you know that you can fail fast. Mm-hmm. And then my CFO, I said, look, I will spend that 5% of my budget, which was a lot. Let me spend 1 or 2% on ideas that maybe don't work out. Mm-hmm. And if they don't work out, we will cut them together. So it's important to stop something that doesn't work.
Yes.
That gives you credibility. I also think it's very important that you call out the successes that you have. And I could have done better on that, but like many IT people, I'm not that great a communicator. And I think we could all use a little bit better marketing around the stuff that we do achieve, because success brings success. Mm-hmm. And I could have done better to make sure that it would be visible that the business initiatives that were powered by IT were successful. And I think that is the big takeaway from the CDO-CIO battle. Mm-hmm. Every other business leader that was watching that situation now understands their role a little bit better. They know that they are ultimately the customer owners or the owners of the vendor management or the owners of their molecule development. And then they take accountability and responsibility to make sure that innovation is happening in their space, supported by a digital officer or by IT people. But in general, they are now, and that's the biggest change. I see many more business leaders jumping in and saying, well, it is complex. It's technology, but I can handle it. Okay. Just 5 or 10 years ago, many executives said, oh, this is too complex. Mm-hmm. Let's leave it for the nerds. They would expect someone like Dr. Brown to come up and do something.
And do the stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you. So basically you're saying that also the CDOs in their generations, they were kind of enabling organizations, even if it's arguable what the countable use case value is they created maybe, but they were opening up that now we have more ownership of innovation, technology, also data and AI capabilities within the particular business departments. That's what you're saying?
That's what I see. And I think that this eventually, and I hope that this will be the case more and more, whenever one of those initiatives succeeds, it will go back to the business line in charge of that.
Yeah.
Because it's ultimately about their customers' success. Mm-hmm. One example in that I'm familiar with is, for example, when you're recommended a certain prescription for blood pressure reduction, wouldn't it be great if you had a machine learning companion that would tell you how well your body is reacting to that medicine, and that would tell you about what is the best time of the day or the best dosage that works for you,
or the food to go with, or anything like this.
Exactly. This is increasingly possible with electronic biomarkers, and given that we have computers in our pockets now, which are connected to sensors in our bodies, like wearable devices, that's increasingly the case. However, the limit there is, this is a decision that belongs with a doctor. Now, if all of this becomes a companion capability for the doctor and enables a better patient-to-doctor conversation, everybody wins. But enabling the patient and the doctor conversation is something that pharmaceutical companies don't always participate. So what's important is that pharmaceutical companies realize that digital transformation is a team sport, and that you need to find partnerships that will enable this innovation to a degree and with a reach that maybe you alone cannot have. And I think that is the message I would like to leave with many of the people in the audience for the next step in data science. Data scientists need to become better team sport players. They need to realize that now they're increasingly like the Messis of the football team, where they have to serve the information so that other people can score the goal. And if it's necessary, they will run all the way and score. But sometimes it's about enabling others.
So it's not the Ronaldos anymore? It's not the unicorns that do all the work, and
the heroes are going to be those that are the legendary midfielders that are able to really make sure the team wins.
So I think, how was this? Or talk a little bit also about your experiences in the pharmaceutics industry, where I personally had the feeling that on the one hand, very research oriented, but also kind of closed shop research departments, let's say.
Yes.
And then on the other hand, a lot of regulation and let's say not a fail fast attitude, let's say, right? You don't want to fail fast on medicine for children, obviously, right? So how did this come together, and where do you see AI and machine learning evolve in the pharmaceutics industry for the next years?
The early adopters have been and continue to be the colleagues in the research department that have applied machine learning and even AI methods to discovering new drugs and molecules, let's say at the molecule level. They are now able to simulate in silico, so with computer models, a lot of what used to take very long time to be able to do in humans or even in animals. So, for example, toxicology. Whether the molecule is going to really work in the context of a living organism or a living tissue. You can simulate a lot of this now in computer models. And some of these computer models, inclusive German companies, are evolving them to a very fast pace. There's a fascinating podcast that I would refer, a recent interview to the founders at BioNTech. They do a much better job than I could in telling you how the COVID vaccine was generated in 7 months instead of in 7 years, and how their mindset as scientists and their rapid adoption of methods of data science allow them to get this fast. I think that they are very eloquent and to me an inspiration in how they did this. And I found that inspiration in many of my research colleagues from very early on. Even if we were rivals for resources sometimes, I always respected how principled they are, how capable they are, how good use of resources they did. And that takes you to a molecule that was a good candidate for becoming a medicine.
Yes.
The development cycle, I think, is where the next frontier is, because in the development, you still need to take that molecule and run it through multiple phases to see that it doesn't harm, that it does good in the areas it's supposed to do, and that it's safe in humans. Essentially, those are the steps. And then there are many. You have to isolate for many confounding factors. I don't think technology and information technology or machine learning we have not seen the full impact in that development cycle. But now increasingly we're seeing that once a medicine is approved, we are seeing a lot more momentum around finding the right patient for that medicine. And that is in large dependent on physicians that are computer enabled as well, that have iPads, that have, well, not necessarily iPads, but computer devices that allow them to see that the patient in front of them, combined with information that I have about that patient, bring me to the right therapy. And that is increasingly wonderful. I think the big pharmaceutical companies have the uniqueness of taking this to 50 markets and hundreds of millions of patients very quickly. That's, I think, one of the, Pfizer in this case, they partner very well with some of the innovators to bring the medicine, the vaccines, to hundreds of millions of people. Only big pharmaceutical companies have the machine to enable to do that, and that's fantastic when you say partnership. Yes.
Gotcha. So you're talking also, and we had this also in our last talk, precision medicine. I mean, at this time we wouldn't have known how relevant this is gonna get, right, with the whole pandemic and everything. So what I hear a lot of, but also what I sometimes had the opinion of doctors is that they are basically do their I don't know, if you have someone who is a surgeon, so he might suggest surgery as a solution to your problem, right? And that's why all this alternative medicine, I think, is increasingly growing up, because we more and more understand that maybe the sickness isn't the problem, but maybe it's the cure. Yeah, maybe the body really wants to get rid of all toxins, and basically it's our lifestyle, and it's where I'm heading to is that a human being has to be not just diagnosed in one particular field, but is a holistic kind of thing happening. Yeah.
Yes.
And how do you see the technology can maybe bridge the gap between our Western medicine, which is much more symptom focused, let's say, to a more, I don't know, let's say, Eastern
thinking on
medical thinking. So do you see that technology can actually help to bridge this gap now, enabling for more individual treatments and holistic therapies?
That's an interesting thought, Alex. I think you hit the nail in the head when you say that many medicine solutions that I've seen, many therapies are oriented to the symptoms or to one of the effects. When you think about very sick people, they don't have one thing that goes wrong, right? I mean, there's 10 things that are not working. And sometimes they compound.
Yes.
I mean, you cannot move so much, so your exercise level decreases, so you put on weight, and that brings on early diabetes, and then that complicates your heart problem, and then, it's a spiral. I think Eastern medicine understands that you need to look at the patient both, to put it very simply, on the spiritual needs, the physical needs, and the behavioral needs. I increasingly see digital health initiatives and digital health startups that look at the behavior of people, that look at the genetics of people, and that look at on what people eat. So the combination of all of these is increasingly approximating us to the Eastern thinking, right? The difference in Eastern thinking is that this is very ancient thinking about diagnosis and treatment, and it's relatively slow. I mean, I'm a user of some of these as well in my family, and it's preventative. But if you break a bone, the prevention is not going to help all that much, but an orthopedic surgeon is going to be probably your best course of action. So I think that increasingly medicine is starting to, so it's surprising, but you go to some doctors now in the West and they tell you about what are your eating habits. And even just one generation ago, even a couple of years ago, that wasn't the case. But younger doctors that are better trained are starting to see that nutrition plays a role.
I think there wasn't even a class on nutrition in the.
There isn't.
That's crazy, huh?
Well, it seems crazy to us now, but these are specialists that continue to treat your heart, but not your whole body. And I think that needs to change, and it's going to change when the doctors have access. So just to put it, the simplest example, how many times do you go to a physician and you are asked to complete a clinical history, which is, 10 pages of what are your allergies?
Smoke, yes,
exactly.
No.
These things are increasingly available on a record that the doctor could just look at and see, complication or what is the right course. Very humble things like that, Alex. I'm not ambitioning that we have a whole digital twin of you that the doctor can manipulate on a computer. I'm just thinking, can we have a homogeneous patient record that I don't have to capture all of that?
Yeah, sure. I'm with you. I mean, this is hopefully definitely going to happen also to see the treatments and the diagnostics you had in the past.
And think of the data that then you could mine.
Yeah, definitely.
In those electronic records.
I think that where I'm heading to a little bit is like we have this, as you said, preventive, let's say Eastern medicine. Yeah, it's a little bit now put in one basket, but anyways, but this is a little bit voodoo-ish. Yeah, it's not like, okay, you do A and then B happens, or C, or maybe D, but like not the whole alphabet. Yeah. And then so we are more in this Western thinking of root causes and typical engineering. Yeah, in German we need decision trees for everything. And but maybe this can come together, like because basically the reason why we had the specialization in doctors in Western medicine wasn't always like that, right? We also used to have holistic people, but then it was just too complex. And now, like in data science, also we had to specialize.
Yeah.
But now maybe with the technology, it's possible with those AI companion, let's say, to become more holistic again. And because basically the AI takes a lot of, I don't know, for example, diagnosing on X-rays, for skin cancer, your dots or whatever that is.
Or even tumors,
Or tumors, So basically, so do you see that maybe that it's cheaper and more doable with data and AI to have a individualized treatment that takes breaking your bone, obviously, with your best therapy to making it heal again, but maybe you're also talking about your nutrition why did the bone break in the first place? Or maybe you're not really flexible and you made a strange move, or
you're not getting enough calcium if you're old.
There you go. Yeah. Did you see that happening?
Yes, for sure.
This is super amazing.
That's I think we think of this as strategically in my previous company. We thought of this as the promise of science in 2030.
So I think getting older is actually an illness.
Well, it's a condition.
Eldering, yeah, okay.
Exactly, and there's a lot of money going into treating the age as a condition.
Yes.
And aging gracefully.
Aging, yeah.
I think that what we will see first is specialist applications that will be companion therapy, companion diagnostic or companion therapies administered by a clinician that understands the patient well. But I think that you're starting to see. Let's take, for example, China. China organizes its healthcare system around tier 1 cities, tier 2, and tier 3. And there's only what you would call a Western-style hospital like Charité in Berlin in big cities. And then there's rural centers in China that have no or very few, for example, radiologists. So you cannot have you can have an X-ray, maybe, but you cannot interpret that X-ray. Because there's no one there to look at the X-ray and say this is a tumor or this is not. So I think you will see that health systems in Brazil or Mexico or China, they will adopt AI methods or machine learning methods as early diagnosis to be able to say with some precision whether you refer the patient to a tier 2 hospital or a tier 1 hospital. That's already happening, for example, with an X-ray of the chest. You can quickly see if someone has a condition which requires specialist treatment or is it just a cough. And what I have seen more recently is that this machine learning agents are as good now as a radiologist with 8 years of training.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. It's not like an experienced radiologist, but it's better than many just trained radiologists. Yeah. And if you can take that machine learning that radiologist to a population that is completely underserved or unserved today, then you're making a giant leap already towards a better health outcome.
And this is already happening.
That's
right?
already happening. Yeah. And there's maybe 300 or 400 implementations of these ideas, not with the X-rays, but with many fields of expanding capabilities. Then the people that gave you that are going to start investing money in more difficult to diagnose or difficult to treat conditions that are maybe things that even when you do have a radiologist, do I want a second machine learning opinion?
Exactly. Like a companion,
and we will see that like a next best option. And then I think you're going to start seeing prescriptive and predictive medicine that is going to be more widely adopted. I mean, I can, going no further, there's a wonderful company called Huma out of the UK that when my wife was very sick with COVID, this machine learning capability by Huma allowed for a remote doctor to monitor her condition through the 4 or 5 critical days by just putting her phone next to her chest.
Wow.
And I felt so much safer. We felt so much safer and well served. So shout out to these guys because people like them are going to transform the way we live, and it's not too far away.
And I also think that with all the fields that technology is advancing, it becomes more democratized, right? I mean, maybe some doctors don't want that, I don't know, but also that how many people are Googling symptoms,
conditions?
Right? Yeah, this is like one of the, I don't know, maybe mostly Googled topics,
It is.
And so, but we're losing ourselves a little bit, but it's just so amazing. You have so many stuff I can talk with you about. So maybe you're an international leader, right? I mean, you can basically work anywhere. You have experience globally. So maybe it's a little bit personal question, but why did you choose Germany or Europe? And also a little bit, maybe can you elaborate where would you see a part of Europe as a business region globally to take advantage of that? And why do you personally stay here, let's say?
Okay. That's it's an interesting question, Alex, and I've thought a lot about this because yes, I am in many ways an immigrant into Germany, and I have been welcome here. So I even bought a lederhosen and everything. So I'm getting more and more native.
I'm also
yes.
an immigrant. I was born in East Germany, so I feel with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I came to Europe 20 years ago in a way because I wanted my children to have access to the mindset and values that Europe is espouses. I think these values are around freedom, around the ability to have a balanced life, a life that is not necessarily driven by consumerism, but rather by who you are and what your potential is. I wanted my children to grow here, and they are now young men. And I see that they speak multiple languages. They think of themselves as how much can I do for the world and not the other way around. And that means a lot to me. For me as a professional, and you are a good example of this. In Europe, you have people that are incredibly well educated. Many of them also have a purpose-driven life. And that purpose is not to have a bigger house or a bigger car, but really, can I explore the boundaries of science? What I think we could do better in Europe is to enable people like that to have access to resources, to capital, and to take more risks. Because the one thing that I would think that if I could change one thing in many young graduates in Europe is take a little bit more risk. I mean, you have a long life. You can afford to fail a couple of times. And you can afford to fall down, scrub your knees and start again. There's a high penalty for failure in our society here in Europe, in which, if people have been an entrepreneur and don't make it, there's a little bit of a stigma. It's so much better to work for a large company and have the company badge.
And even if you fail, if you get insolvency as a CEO, then I think you're blocked to start the next business for like 5 years or something. I don't know if you knew that.
I haven't experienced it yet.
That is some crazy laws also that are underlining this, and I think you have a very, very interesting point here, because failing fast is very nice, but we have this 100% quality engineering kind of culture and quality made in Germany, and it used to be like this, right? Because if you wanted to build something, you had to put screws and metal and oil and everything together. And if you break it, then it would take time to do this again. But now with the internet and data and everything, it has become much more easier to basically release something early and then have your clients test it out in a way. Yeah.
And improve it for you. I think that this is very much the American mindset, right?
Yeah.
I mean, put it out there, let the market improve it. And I think they put innovation ahead of security or privacy. The reason why I started my cybersecurity business with the other founders here in Europe is because we believe there needs to be a balance between privacy, safety, and innovation. And we find that GDPR is already a good step in the direction of protecting the privacy rights of all of us. Patients to start with. I think that patients in Europe are safer. Now we need to continue adding the dose of innovation that allows us to try out things. In cybersecurity, I see incredibly competent professionals in Germany, in France, in the UK, that are at the front edge of what technology can do. And they have an innate and cultural understanding of privacy, which is not always the case in other places. So our investors believe that the capabilities, the human capabilities are here. They believe that the neutrality with regards to the rights of privacy and the rights of innovation are here. And they are willing to inject capital in this region to power entrepreneurs here. I think that as ever, investors want a return on their capital.
Sure.
And I do think that entrepreneurs here need to be balanced with regards to what failure looks like. Because I think that the elements of success are easier to define. But, failure isn't always failure. Alex, how many times have you started projects that don't work? You started an internet cafe and it didn't work. It is important to understand that from every failure, there's so many takeaways and lessons and success.
Yeah, and it's also like, how do you define failure? But then that's very interesting. I think very logical also for you to say that in a culture that is actually valuing humans or has a human centric usage of technology already built in, right? Deeply, that this would be a very nice cradle for cybersecurity global leader.
That's my thinking. I think that often we criticize the European values for being too humanistic, but I think that this is the great hope we have.
Yes.
That I really strongly believe, that's why I'm here as well. If we can have again these humanistic values be applied to this digital transformation, it is essential, because humanistic values will make artificial intelligence be aligned to what advances are the cause of our race, of our humankind. It is not about the faceless enterprise. It's about the humans that form part of that, and the people that are their customers have names. And I think that when I look at the way that Europe thinks about sustainability, the way that we look at facing climate change, I see a more balanced dialogue here, which is inspiring to me.
Very nice. So how do you see the role of AI in cybersecurity? How is the intersection for you, also coming from the pharmaceutical background?
Thank you. For me, cybersecurity is an essential component, it's existential component of good data governance, data management, and data science. I mean, I would not trust a machine learning agent that has been tampered with. Or if the machine learning agent has been trained on data sets that are not reliable, or that could go away or could be held for ransom, I would feel less safe. So I think that increasingly the public is going to demand that the machine learning solutions are strengthened with cybersecurity locks that don't allow malicious agents to tamper with that data or to take away insights on what my preferences are. So I see that increasingly the digital health companies that I work with, and even big pharma, is putting cybersecurity as an essential component of any data science project they have for that reason. I also think that it's very exciting technology in cybersecurity. You know, I think that reducing the signal or improving the signal to noise ratio, there's threats everywhere. How do you know which ones are the ones that are really posing risk to your business model that you should counter? This is where I do believe that there's an opportunity by being better at cybersecurity than anybody else out there. And this will be a strategic advantage for companies that adopt this capability. And cybersecurity should be, to be digitally resilient is a capability that will be a competitive advantage. It already is for some. Imagine you work with automotive. Imagine that you know that your car, self-driving,
can be hacked.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you know that the cars of a certain company are being hacked, but not from another company, you're more likely to give a 5-star rating and to come back. I want every one of my clients to have a 5-star rating when it comes to resilience.
Yeah, it's like your ADAC crash test or whatever that is. You will have the same. So that's very just technically. I think that's very interesting with the noise to signal ratio, and also you mentioned something in the beginning about labeling or having annotations. So the problem with cyber attacks is that once you have been attacked on a certain pattern, hopefully you know what it is, and then you kind of know this pattern, and you can train your AI to look out for any similar patterns like this, right? But then the problems comes with the innovation also on the dark side, let's say. So can you give us an idea maybe, or are you working also on AI that is, well, I don't know, like anomaly detection or so, going with more unsupervised approaches? Or
yes.
Can you touch it?
I'll elaborate a little bit on it. Right now, I would say that 4 of the companies in our platform are very much investing on machine learning and even artificial intelligence enabled semi-automatic or automatic agents to look at precisely the signals and assess whether they fit a pattern. And they're doing this with a risk mindset. By this pattern, do they put at risk my business assets? Because there's all kinds of vulnerabilities that one can attack, and some of them are grave, others not so much. You need to be able to quickly address the ones that are serious, and the more you can create, separate the false alarms, the better it is. All of our companies are doing that. One of our companies called Prevalent AI is really looking at improving the signal to noise ratio to really apply banks of really automates against the signals that come in and supervise which of these deserve the attention of a human. Always keeping a human on the loop so that bridges can be lifted or actions can be taken, but within a certain set of, as of now, business rules. Eventually, this will come out differently. But I think that we should, if you take a step back, some attackers are very sophisticated state actors that are deeply funded, but they're going with a lot of precision against a few targets. The majority of us and our enterprises are at risk mostly from criminals that have found in things like ransomware or phishing a really profitable business. So as long as you're protecting from the 5 or 6 basic attack modes that evolve every year or two, then I think you'll be fine. If you are a certain, in Germany, we have some enterprises that have leading edge technology or capability worldwide. They need to protect against state actors that may have nefarious motives. But in general, most of our enterprise customers have to worry about basic threats that are driven by just criminals that want a quick buck. And as such, these criminals are looking for probing for which is the way to get a quick buck. They're also profit oriented.
Okay, so they're not like specifically targeting one company because they are their competition or something, but they just want to make money and they just throw out some bait and they look which fishes
and see who comes back. Exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
And this is, I think, that in aggregate, this is the biggest risk to Europe and to the European companies. Am I vulnerable to phishing attacks, to ransomware attacks, to denial of service attacks, the basics? And the counters are to have good backups, to really understand what your cron jewels are and to protect those cron jewels differentially. And this is me speaking to data scientists. All of you guys and your identities and the data sets you have, these are crown jewels and they need to be protected. But the majority of our business proceedings need to be protected with things like passwords, dual password, dual identity management and authentication methods, because we need to protect from let's say it's like traveling on the subway in a big city. You need to know where your wallet is.
Exactly.
And you don't show around your cash.
Yes. So it's interesting. So that's maybe also a little bit closing the loop here from IT background, medical industry, because what you're saying is basically also in cybersecurity is not so much about focusing on all the different ways to be attacked. It's also about knowing your vulnerabilities and about taking the right preventative measures, which is then also the trend, let's say, or maybe the right thing to do in
medicine,
Alex. Right? So this is, I think, a very nice.
One of my clients puts it very nicely. He says that you have to stay healthy and then recover quickly. By staying healthy is, follow good behaviors. Basic what we call cybersecurity hygiene. Change your passwords, have dual factor authentication, and have a backup. These 3 things that would be top of mind, the 3 things that would reduce your risk the most. And that allows you generally to stay healthy. But if you do have an issue, then you have to recover quickly. And that means, that you have to have the right partner to call. You have to know what to do to recover your backups and your business procedures. And you need to know what's bad and what is really bad. Any attack would be bad, but some attacks are worse, right? If the supply chain or your production line in a great automotive company is at risk because one supplier along the line got hacked and there's no seats, that's a big issue. And that is very bad. But if someone is, tampering with a cafeteria payroll, it's maybe it's not so bad that you have no Coca-Cola today. So it's you need to assess your vendors, have multiple lines of defense, and have a proportional response. But take actions to stay healthy and recover quickly if you have an issue.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So if I now got really interested also in one of our listeners in learning about how to leverage data science, AI in cybersecurity, are you guys looking for people at the moment, or?
We always are. Because the combination of data science and cybersecurity is a very specialized field even today. 3 of our companies are actively hiring for this kind of profiles that are data scientists that have an interest or a specialization in cybersecurity. So for anyone in the podcast, you can find me on LinkedIn or through Alex.
Yes.
But also I think that increasingly the field is going to attract data scientists which see the signal to noise and this automation as something interesting. And as engineers, I mean, we're always curious. We're always looking for a big problem to solve. And this field has so much opportunity. It's a very exciting area of development for talent. Let me put it this way. If I were back to the future in the early 2000s, if I were today looking at where should I go to spend the next 5 to 10 years of my career, I would be a data scientist in cybersecurity.
That makes perfect
This
sense.
is where I would start today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So maybe just to wrap it up, we have to, this was a very long discussion and great insights. We really went from back even 20 years about the Y2K bug and looking into the future, where AI is going, where AI in healthcare particularly is going, where the big pharma companies are going, partnering with innovators. We also see in this field that a company in Germany like BioNTech can still be a world leader in innovation. And now we also had the loop with cybersecurity and what's happening and where to kind of go today if you are a aspiring data and AI person. Is there something else you want to share, or maybe for our audience?
I want to congratulate you personally, but also your companies and Alexam in particular for this decade. I think that it's a decade which is told very quickly, but there's countless companies that tried and didn't make it. I think you have been able to attract talent that sees beyond even what you see, and you have been able to enable that talent to continue shaping your ideas. But more than anything, when I look at your company, you have been focused on client success through data science. It's not about making the data science work or making the data set clean. It's about making your client successful. And that, I think, is the shout that I have. I mean, congratulations, keep it up. I look forward to another decade of accelerated growth for you and your company. And who knows where you will be in 10 years in terms of professional success and personal success. But I mean, it's been an amazing ride for your colleagues, for your company. More of the same.
Thank you very much, Abel. Those were very nice closing words. And thank you very much for coming. And for being with us, and for your trust, and for the great insights you gave us.
It's great to see this journey.
Thank you.